Higher expectations, Vayikra 57:81. Years ago, I caught an episode of Law and Order, and two attorneys were preparing to cross-examine a priest. One attorney said to the other, "We can't be too hard on the priest during the cross-examination because it will backfire. People trust priests. They'll believe clergy. Whatever a clergy member says, people will believe." Unfortunately, we know there have been many members of the clergy who have taken advantage of such trust. There's been scandal after scandal involving money, sex, you name it, it's been done. The Torah warns us about this. It says, Im ha-Kohen ha-Mashiach yechata, if the anointed priest sins. Before the Torah can even conclude the pasuk, the verse, the Midrash Vayikra Rabbah says, wait a minute, the anointed priest, this holy person, is going to sin? How in the world can this be? But then the Midrash responds, pitiful is the province where the doctor has gout, the foreman has one eye, and whose defender turns prosecutor in a capital case. What is the Midrash teaching us? That even the experts will make mistakes and don't always live up to expectations. May be their fault, may not be their fault, but they too will make mistakes. And the Kohen, the priest, is no exception to the rule. Now, we should note here, we're talking about shkia, a true mistake, an accidental error. Perhaps the Kohen went to purify himself ritually and didn't do the purification correctly, then went to officiate and accidentally officiated while he was tameh, impure. Could happen. But Kohanim can deliberately sin too. It's called a mazid, a deliberate sin. We have an example from Sefer Shmuel, the book of Samuel. Eli is the Kohen HaGadol. He's the high priest, and his two sons, Chofni and Pinchas, are serving under him as assistant high priests. The Torah tells us that these two young men are scoundrels. Why? They steal sacrificial meat, they're pocketing it, and they're using their position to gain sexual favors from women. Now, they don't last very long. God is unhappy with these young men. Bnei Yisrael goes into battle against the Plishtim, the Philistines, and they die in battle. And then God confronts Eli and says to Eli, Eli, you turned a blind eye to your son's sins. You should have confronted them. You let them get away with abusing their power and doing horrendous things. Because of that, I'm going to take the priesthood from your line of the Aaronite family and give it to another part of the Aaronite family. And later on, Sadok becomes the priest, the high priest, displacing Eli's family as the high priests. The message God is making is we don't turn a blind eye to people's transgressions just because they have an exalted position. The Kohen, if anything, should be held to a higher standard. He's to be an exemplar, not a ganef. Based on the phrase HaKohen HaMashiach, the anointed priest, the Talmud in Horayot says that the Kohen is almost on the same exalted level as the Melech, the king. But we see the king too is not above the law. There's only one person in the entire Torah who's commanded to be humble, the Melech, the king. Only one person bows the entire time while davening b'Amidah, the Melech, the king, to remind him that he is not above the law. And unfortunately for David HaMelech, King David, he learned that one the hard way. He thought he was going to be able to get away with the Bathsheba affair. But what happened? Natan, the court prophet, Nathan, came in and dressed David down, made it very clear to David that he was not above the law and he had to be held accountable for his sins. Now, David should have realized that he couldn't pull a fast one just because he was king and hide it. God would know and hold him accountable. Why should have David known this? Because in Devarim, Moshe reminds everyone, Hanistarot lachashem Elokeinu v'niglot lanu ulvavenu. The secret things belong to God. You think you're going to pull a fast one? Think again. God sees and will hold you accountable, as David found out. But the things that are revealed, the things that we know about, we need to hold people accountable for their sins. For if we don't, they belong to our children as well. In other words, if we're going to kick the can down the road and not confront people when they sin, who's going to have to deal with the mess we're leaving behind? The next generation, our children. We see wrongdoing, it's our responsibility to address it. Now, Sforno equates the Kohen who sins to a shliach tzibor who makes an error while he's davening. He says that the shliach tzibor, if a prayer leader makes an error while he's davening, it's a siman ra, a bad sign for the tzibor, for the congregation. But I'm going to suggest it's only a siman ra, a bad sign, if we remain silent and don't confront the shliach tzibor, the prayer leader. Now, I don't think Sforno is saying if the poor guy makes a mistake pronouncing the word, we're supposed to jump on him and chastise him. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, do you want a shliach tzibor representing you who's a money launderer, who's a crook? No, that's not the person you want representing you as you stand before God, as the community stands before God. If you send up somebody like that, that truly is a bad sign. That's a bad omen for the congregation. Unfortunately, today, our leaders tend not to be held in particularly high esteem. Poll after poll shows that people think our leaders are liars and crooks. It's the Watergate effect. The Torah reminds us that there's a danger of having low expectations of those that lead us. For those that lead us will indeed lead us, but we have to ensure that we're not letting them lead us downwards, but instead we're demanding that they lead us upwards. Shabbat Shalom.